Yeah. Now it's recording, and we've created a new layer called body that's vector-based. So one of the big things we're going to do difference is, last week, because it was about a drawn process, everything was always on one layer, so we sort of animated the whole thing just in one timeline layer. This time we're going to use multiple layers. So the body layer that's vector-based is going to be just for the body of the squid, nothing else. Okay, so what I'm now going to do, I've created the body layer, I'm on my first frame. I'm going to go over to my color palette and I'm going to select on the colors, I'm going to make sure that I've got vectorized line selected. So it's this one here, you should be able to see that if you've reset your view. So I've got vectorized line selected, and then in my tool properties, I'm just going to increase the size of it so slightly and put the smoothing at about 40, between 40 and 45. Yeah, that's not too bad. And now with this is the pencil tool that I'm using here, by the way. So it's the pencil tool. Maximum size I put 26.8 and then smoothing 42.5. I think smoothing is really helpful. It does sometimes feel a little bit like Flash or Adobe Animate, whatever you want to call it. But it's still quite a nice level of smoothness. The other thing I'm going to do is make sure that none of the settings down here, so this is the tool properties for the pencil tool, but none of the settings are on except this one, which is the auto close gap. So everything else is switched off apart from auto close gap. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to actually sketch in just the body of the squid. So yeah, vectorized line black, smoothing's up, that's all fine. So the squid's going to be kind of roughly. And then with this, one of the key differences between the brush tool and the pencil tool is with the pencil tool, you are just doing outlines. You're not actually painting anything, you're just creating basic content. So what I can then do is once I've drawn this rough shape, I can go to my contour editor, which is up here. So contour editor. I can just click this and then just drag the shape just to bring it more in line with sort of roughly kind of where I want it. I'm just kind of rounding it off. You can double click as well to bring in like the Bezier handles if you want to. I just want to zoom in a little bit. So yeah, just bring that up slightly. Yeah, it's not too bad, I suppose. Cool. Okay, yeah, that'll do. In terms of the squid's body, that's good enough for the moment. So the next thing I'm going to do is kind of once I've made that outline, and it's really important as well that I've closed the gap. Now if we look up here, this is my outline. When we had the pencil tool active, I say keep this on, this auto close gap. What it's done, we'll go back to the selection tool and select this, is you can see that even though the two lines didn't actually cross over, so when I was drawing the shape, the two lines didn't cross over, but Harmony is smart enough to realise that I was trying to close the shape, and it's done it for me, and it's put a little line in there to close that gap. So now what I can do, if we zoom out onto this, because the gap is closed, I can colorize that shot. So the way I colorize it is I go to my pencil tool, and then up the top here it says create color art from line art. It's this little flattened down menu at the top of my camera view. So when I click that, nothing happens as such. But then when I go to my color art layer, did I tell you guys about color art layers last week? Did we talk about line? Oh no, I didn't. So the way that, when we think about layers in Harmony and Photoshop and everything, you always think about them like physical objects, like it's one layer, then it's a different layer, and they're like separate things. But actually, it's not just that. So you've got those physical layers, which are here, But then each one of these drawings has at least 2 different art layers built into it. It has a line art layer, which is the L, and then it has a colour art layer. And they're actually separate entities sort of within each drawing that we create. So what that's done by clicking this button up here, create colour art from line art, is it's taken that internal line, so that line that we see there with the contour editor, it's taken that line and it's going to take it down to this colour art layer. So when we click on this colour art layer, by clicking just here, you should be able to see that blue contour line come to like appear. Yeah, so it's basically showing us that that's the outline for our work. Then what we can do is down here in our colour palette, what shall I go for? I'm going to go for a blue, but I'm going to change it to a nicer blue because that's kind of hideous. So my local colour is going to kind of look, yeah, around there. So I've just changed the blue ever so slightly. And then I can go to my paint bucket tool, which is on the left-hand side. So this one. And I can dump that straight in. And because the gap was already closed up here, it will colour really quickly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust the shape of this ever so slightly so that I can line up to create the rest of my drawing. So what I'll do is I'm going to just go to turn animate off, which is this button here. Make sure that's off. And then, no, I'm not going to transform it there. I'll choose to transform it up here. So I'm just going to grab my shape. I'm just going to move it into a position where it's a little bit more out of the way. So I'm going to use the translate tool, which is this one, just to move it up. I'm going to use the rotate, just to turn it slightly. So I'm going to just bring it around like that. And then I'm going to use the scale, hold shift just to constrain it. I'm just going to use the scale to sort of bring it down a little bit. So I'm just going to make it sort of to there. That's fine. There we go. So what that's allowed me to do basically is just kind of move that into a better position. Now what I'm going to do is take my, so kind of that's fine, the body's fine. I'm now going to do 4 more layers. Each one of them is going to be a tentacle of the squid, and I'm going to name them appropriately. So I'll do a new drawing layer. And the quickest way to do this actually is to, let's call one LT_1, so it's long tentacle 1, and it's vector and vector. But instead of just hitting add and close, I'm just going to hit add, and you'll see that the menu stays up. So I can go, now we can call one called LT2, so I'll add that. Then I'm going to add one that's going to be called ST2, so short tentacle 2. And hit add. And then I'm going to create one that's called, the final one I'm going to make for the moment is going to be short tentacle 1. And then I'm going to hit add and close. So what I've got now, if I go into my menu, I've got a body, and then I've got LT1, LT2, ST1 and ST2, all on separate layers. And then at each one of these layers, I'm going to kind of repeat the same process as what I did with my body. So I'll go to my pencil tool, and this is the, just pause for a moment because this is where a lot of people trip up. I'm going to go to my pencil tool, and I'm going to make sure I go back to my line art layer, select my vectorized line, and now that I've got, what one did I pick? So I'm on short tentacle 1 with the pencil tool, line art layer, vectorized line, and now I'll go in and draw my next component. So it's going to look something. You are late, but not too late. Have a seat. So I'm going to just go through the same process again of just, getting the kind of shape that I want. I'm going to bring that down actually. It's too wide.
Are we doing it on 2 paths?
Sorry?
Are we doing the on 2 paths?
We are, we're still working on the squid, but we're doing a completely different way of creating it. So this is a different kind of animation. So you need to jump in here, create a new file, and then I'll kind of help you catch up. So that was that's my line art there, and I had auto close on. So if I zoom in, and you see it's done it again for me. It's closed the gaps. So I always want to make sure those gaps are closed. It's closed the gaps for me. I might just move this one up a little bit. And then I do the same thing. Go to my pencil tool, hit that create color art from line art, go down to my color, select blue, paint bucket, dump it in. And then because I am really, really lazy, I'm actually going to copy and then paste that into my other short one. There we go. I'm going to copy and paste it. But then I'm actually going to use the transform tool to flip it round. That's terrible. It's so lazy, but I don't care. Go. So I've done my first two, and then I'll do my other two as well. So LT, let's start on LT2, line art layer with the pencil tool. Might zoom out a tiny little bit as well, actually, because I think zooming out is quite helpful just to kind of get when you're working with a more complex shape. So, oh, my mistake, didn't change back to my vectorized line, so I'm going to go back to that line. And then same process, contour editor, and then just get it where you want it to be. So you know what, that's not bad. That's actually, yep, close enough. So we're just going to go in, so hit that same pencil tool, create color art from line art, jump down and just make sure that the gap here is closed. And yes, so it's definitely closed. So I can go in, paint bucket. That's it, and then I'm going to do exactly the same bit of cheating there. So copy that, paste it. Yeah, so what you should have is something that kind of looks like that. So 4 separate elements.
I think I'm missing a step because now it's not letting me to print.
Okay, let's have a look. Like I said, there are kind of quite a few steps in here. But, okay, so what's
Just
going
like,
on?
because I'm just layer, this one I can't.
Okay, so go back to your line art layer. Select your pencil tool to draw it with. Now hit this button.
Oh yeah, true. That
Yeah?
one.
There you go. Okay. So what we're doing, we're going for new drawings. So you can go to new drawing, which is down here, this one.
No.
No, not that one. Yeah, click and hold and select new drawing layer. And then you want to call it body. So this is the body of the squid. And then we're using slightly different tools to last week. Last week was very much like drawn old style animation. This is not that. This is something else. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to use the pencil tool, which is this pencil here. So that's going to be used to draw the outline shapes. And we're going to use this line, vectorized line. This is the color that we're going to use for the outline shape. So what we'll do is we're going to kind of draw this and then we'll pause and I'll kind of walk you through the next step. So what we've done here is we've used the pencil tool to draw the outline, so you can see it's black. And then with the pencil tool active, so we did the body first. So the body is the first of its own drawing layers. It's this one here. So did the body with the outline. And then with the pencil tool active, so this is the pencil tool here. With the pencil tool active, you click this button here, which converts the line art into color art. And then we jumped from the line art layer to to the colour art layer, and that allows us to then paint in colour. So the idea is that these are physical layers, but these are the layers that exist inside each one of these. So every drawing object has a colour art and a line art layer. Okay? Yeah, I recommend that you. What's your? Is this working? You might need to duplicate the. So it's here. Okay, so I'll just give you a couple of minutes actually, because I know sometimes you can get a little bit careful about planning it. So when we're drawing our line art and we're using our pencil tool, once we've drawn the shape, we can use the contour editor, which is this one, to click on the line and actually adjust it, so you can kind of get a nice clean line if you want to. So our next step. I'll give you a bit of time to slow down a little bit. We're going to look at the order of things and how they kind of work together. So we're going to start to look at the node view a little bit today, and look at how we start to control lots of different objects.
So can I duplicate the other things?
Sorry? You can, if you've done it on its own. Have you done them on two separate layers, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look. So first off, you don't need to, is that just one frame? That is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so once you've drawn it, you can just like select the layer and Command C, and then go on to the empty layer on a different empty frame and new drawing, and yeah, Command V. What I tend to do though, because you can see I've copy and pasted mine, they're not fresh drawing every time, is when I paste it onto a new drawing layer, I use the move tool up here to actually move it to a different position, and then I make sure this button is off. So make sure animate mode is off, and then I use the transform tool to like flip it upside down. So I just kind of like invert the image, which is how I get it looking slightly different, ever so slightly different. we're just going to, I'll give you another couple of minutes, but then I want to move forward. So I'd rather kind of give you as much information as I can, and then I'll sort of speak to you both you and assist you as you move forward with it. But don't want to drag them back too long. Go. Okay, so what we're going to do next, I know you're still drawing over there, but it might be worth just pausing for a minute, okay, while we talk through the next bit. So I've drawn these up, and you can see that they just don't really look good. You know, they're just, let's turn that off. You know, it doesn't look particularly sharp. You know, for starters, this is a big problem. You've got this overlap happening here. So what I want to talk to you now about is just first off, how do we order these in a way that looks right? But then how do you control them once you've drawn them? You know, how do you get a bit of control over each layer? So the way that we do that, fairly straightforward actually. First thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our node view. So node view is just here. So I hit the plus up here in the main view, and then I just go down to node view. And then in node view, there's you can do it manually, and I actually prefer to do it manually, which is to click and pull all these individual elements apart. But the other way to do it is there's a little button up here that just says order node view down, and then you just hit OK, and it basically just spreads everything out for you. So this is the node view. And again, I cannot remember if we even looked at this last week. I think I tried to keep you all away from it as much as possible, but this is again where Harmony starts to behave less like Photoshop and more like Maya in terms of relationships between objects. So I'm just going to walk through again like what this is and how it kind of works. So node view basically shows all the relationships between objects in the system. The composite is basically it's an element that allows all the objects to come together before they are sent to a destination. So there's two destinations. The first destination is the display, which is quite literally the camera, like it's sending the objects out to the display. And the second destination is the write. And it's in the write node that we then produce the settings on how we render our film, whether we render it as an image sequence or as a movie file or whatever it might be. And then up here, what we've got are all of the objects as they exist in the timeline. And the best way to read the node view, especially this element, the composite, is from left to right. If it is at the left, if it's on the left, it's at the front, and if it's on the right, it's at the back. And we can see straight away that the order of this is wrong. Okay, so the way that we would sorry, Siri's just going crazy over here. Siri thinks we're having a conversation. We're not. The way that we reorder it is quite easy. You pick up the end of the node line, so just here, and we just drop it in the order we want it. If you want to see a preview of this in real time and how it affects things, one of the ways that you can do that is in the top right. If you hit plus and change this to camera, gives you a little camera view. Okay. So yeah, in the camera view, you can, if you click and drop this over here, you'll see straight away it changes the order and puts the body at the front. You joining in?
Yes.
Go for it. What are we doing? We're doing hybrid animation process. Okay. So a bit of drawing, a bit of non. This is mine. Sorry, I was updating software. Yeah, so straight away, just by dragging that body from the right end to the left end of the composite, it changed the order. As you can see now, it's at the front, which is a little bit better. I might also reorder some of these. So I think it would be kind of cool to have the short ones. Yeah, short ones at the front, long ones at the back, but I want them in numerical order as well. So I'm going to go short 1, short 2, long 1, long 2. And if I click this again, you'll see it will reorder that way. So short, long 1, long 2. That's all fine. So now I can kind of see all of the objects as they exist. What we're going to do now is you want to be able to move these objects without wrecking them. So I want to be able to say to a tentacle, look, you're going to be over here or you're going to be over there. Or say to the body of a squid, you're going to be in this part of the drawing, or this part of the composition or that part, but I don't want to change the drawing itself yet. I want to separate movement and performance into two kind of different areas. So the way that we do that is we use pegs. So best way to kind of apply pegs, I'm going to go back to the camera view because I think it's kind of important that you see what the absence of visual change. In the camera view, I'm just going to hold shift and select all of my drawings. So there's all my drawing elements, and then just here there's a little plus and it says add peg. And when I click that, what happens is all of the drawing elements have a peg added to them. Best way to think about a peg is if the drawing is a sheet of paper, the peg is the peg bar that holds the paper into place. Stops it from moving, stops it from sliding one way or another unless you tell it to. And then if we jump back into our node view and hit that button again, that order button, there we go, you'll see that a new object has appeared attached to each one of the drawing elements. So I can see the body has its, and they all have a really nice, I really like the naming functions in Harmony. They're kind of friendly. So you've got body, body-p, so body peg. Short tentacle 1, short tentacle 1, peg. So it's a nice kind of simple relationship. So what we can start to do now is, first off, we're going to establish the connections of all these pegs. Then we're going to establish how we'd actually maybe use them. So in terms of connections, we're talking about hierarchy. Okay? Pegs. Okay, you've got display notes. So click OK. Click on the one. Okay. Now just hit OK. Okay. Let's try that. There. Okay. So what we're going to do, let's just kind of go through. I'll show you how to connect them all together. So think about it like a human body. Okay. I can move my arm from here to here, and the rest of me stays completely still. But if I move my body from here to here, all my arms and legs follow along. And that's the kind of relationship that you need to build in Harmony. So what I want to do is prioritize some of these elements. I know that the body is the most important. Of all of these objects, the body is the most important. So what I did, I just drew a little box around the body drawing and the body peg. I think it's a good habit to kind of keep things relatively close to one another if they're related, so you keep kind of good visual relationships. Then what I'm going to do is say, look, if the body's in charge, I want all of these tentacles to follow the body. I'm going to click on this little top connector, and I'm just going to drag it and connect it to the bottom, not of the drawing. Let's move you out of the way. Get out of the way. I'm going to connect this peg to the body, and I can do every single one of them like this. So what that basically does is says, look, all of these pegs are important, but they have to listen to the command of this one. This one's in charge, okay? Now if we go back to our camera view, what we can start looking at is what do we actually mean in terms of visually, what do we mean when we use a peg? So what I'll then do is if I now select, let's say the body peg, where is it? So this body peg just here. What I want to do with this is just set it so that it's in the right position. So the way that I do that is I use what's called the advanced animation tools. You should already have them on your screen. If you don't, oh no, I can see them on yours from here. So the advanced animation tools is this tool set just here. I'm going to use the translate one first. So I'm going to click on the translate one. And then it brings up the little so I'm on the body peg. I click the body-p. Then I click this translate tool and it says that this is the center point of your object. I don't want that to be the center point of my object. So I'm going to click on the blue circle and I'm just going to move it to where I feel like the center of my character is. So in 3D, we would call this like the gimbal, which is normally around the hips. With a human character in Maya, you kind of center everything around the hips. I think with the squid, everything for me, feels like it should be centered around the base of the body. I wouldn't do it at the tip here. I'd kind of do it here. What that means is that that is now the center. So if I were to then move to the next tool along, which is the rotate tool, you'll see that it rotates from that central point. So it's saying, look, where's your standard rotation level? You know, where does it start? Well, the other thing it also allows me to do, the rotate tool, is decide kind of what flat is. So it's like, I want to, you know, this is the right way up. This is how my character starts. What I now need to do, and this is where I'm going to kind of leave you to finish drawing your tentacles and keep kind of creating, is I need to set these two things, so the rotation and the translation of all of the pegs. So I'm going to go one at a time. So I'm going to go to short tentacle peg 1, which is here. Notice how it highlights for me. And I'm going to say, right, where does it start from? Well, it starts from kind of up here. In fact, I should maybe move it up a little bit. So it starts from just there. What's its basic rotation? Well, it kind of starts like that. Then I'll go down to my next one. Translate. Bear in mind that, sorry, in case you haven't done it already, animate mode, that little running stick man, has to be off. If it's on, you're going to create all sorts of problems for yourself. So this guy goes down here. All right, I'll leave you for a couple of minutes to have a crack at this and see how you get on. Oh, and keep saving your work. Just, you know. So whilst you're kind of working through this, what I'm going to do is that there's another piece of drawing that I'd like to add. So I'm going to just kind of work on that for a moment. So I'm going to create a new drawing layer and actually draw an eye in. So I'm going to call it eye, adding close. Fine. Peg. So I haven't even drawn the eye yet, but I'm just establishing that it is a drawing, it's a peg, it reacts to the body. Back to camera. Okay, right, I'm just going to save that. Right, how's it going on? That's it, just keep that plan for it. What's up?
So, if I want to color the body,
Okay.
yeah.
So you click on the body drawing. You need to, because you're in line mode, you need to get the information down to color mode. So you click this button here, which is channel. So if you click that already, click it again. So now we go down to color, and you see that blue outline. That is basically the edge of your color, of your kind of zone to color in. So you can use the paint bucket tool, which is there to dump color straight in. Okay, so it's a nice fast way to apply color. So,
Yeah,
Remember
it's
that
just
next
question.
What happens if you restore the workplace?
yeah,
It loses the ability to see.
that's a very interesting question. Have you reset the power on that and then made sure you can actually read the work on tablet?
No,
the system preferences?
Yeah, it's because it was working before, but then I was missing this tool, and then it was said that it was because I needed to restore the workplace, which I did, but then I died.
But then it died.
Yeah.
Pull the power out, plug it back in, go to system preferences and make sure it can read it. Because it might be that there's a dodgy cable hanging out the back of the machine.
But it was working before I updated the workplace.
Yeah, it's Max. They do that. Seriously, because they go through converters to get in the back of the Mac. Sometimes it doesn't read properly, so you have to just check it. Right. Getting on. Well, I think you all chose blue, just like me. So I just did, while you're all kind of working away, I added an eye, and I moved the eye in front of the body. So if I've got an eye on its own peg and it's sitting in front of the body, just because I thought an eye is kind of cool, so I just added an eye. Just gives it a bit more kind of definition.
No, I didn't.
Right. Sorry. Okay, how are we doing? So I'll just give you another moment or two. And then what we're going to look at is what does this actually mean in terms of animation? And then we can look at the difference between the pegs and these control systems and then actually animating. And why would we go through this process? Because at the moment, it kind of feels like we're doing cutout animation, which we could, but we're not going to do that. We are still doing drawn elements. We're going to hybridize it. I think it's the best kind of way to explain that. And we're going to look at some of the more advanced tool sets as well. So that's fun. Are you painting? Yeah, if you're drawing, make sure you draw with pencil tool, not brush tool. Okay, they work very similarly, but they are not the same. So that kind of gives a good practice drawing with pencil tool. How are we doing for time? Okay.
What is this?
Okay. So once you've got all of your drawings, all the pegs moved into the right position, all the right peg relationships, we're going to look at how do we actually make that look better, because it looks flat. It kind of looks like a very, Adobe Macromedia Flash 2001. We need to make it feel a little bit more interesting visually. So I'm going to show you how we can actually colour the assets with a bit more definition, and also talk a little bit about colours. And apologies if I'm repeating myself, but it's really important that we understand how the colours work in Harmony and changing colours and what that kind of means in the long term. Right, let's jump straight into it. Where are we? That's the one I wanted. So when we draw all these elements, we translated line art into colour art, which might seem like a kind of pointless thing because it doesn't look any different. But actually what's happened is the relationships between certain elements have changed by doing that, and it allows us a lot of creative freedom. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my colour palette that I've got here. And I'm going to just make a couple of sort of very subtle changes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new colour. So I'm going to hit the plus, and you'll see it's always called new 0 or new 1, new 2. And I'm going to call it pink. And then I'll double click on the pink, and I'm just going to pick a pink. Simple as that. There we go, pink. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the blue. I'm going to select copy. So selected the blue, copy, and then I'm going to right click again and select paste as a new color. And you'll see that it brings up an identical version of the blue down the bottom. I'm going to go to that new blue. I'm going to double click it, so it brings up this menu. I'm going to put blue, and I'm going to change the name slightly, so it's going to be called Blue LV. And then before I do anything, I'm in the hue slider incidentally. So hue, saturation, value, just here. I'm going to take my marker. So if you just pause for a second. So I've called it blue LV. I'm going to take that marker and I'm just going to pull the colour down slightly. So this is blue, low value. All right, so it's the same blue, but I've removed some of the light from it. I've made it a darker value, lowered the value of the blue. And you'll see it, if I put the two now side by side, you'll see that one is slightly darker than the other. So I've got a pink, my original blue, which we call a local colour. So that's the actual colour of the object. Okay. And then we've got a blue low value. And then I'm going to do the same again. Right click, paste as new colour, and you'll see it adds another blue down the bottom. I'm going to double click it. I'm going to call it blue underscore high value, so HV, and then I'm going to take the slider and I'm going to slide it up and maybe slightly to the left, and then close it. And if I move this one there, you'll see I've now got 3 different values of blue. I've got a light blue, the local blue, the actual blue that I'm using, and then the low value blue. Yeah, when in doubt, just select render view and you'll see that's what it's actually going to look like if I rendered it. So what I now want to do is kind of work with these colours to just make them a bit more visually interesting. So, for example, I think what would be really nice to do at this stage is maybe think about using the low values and the high values to add a sense of like 3-dimensionality to the shape. So you use the low values to kind of add a bit of tone, like a low, a shadow, and the high values to show a bit of light hitting the top of the character. So what I want to walk you through now is how do you actually do that without wrecking it? Like how do you colour something knowing that it's going to be safe and it's not going to get broken? So the way that we colour really quickly in Harmony is we're going to let's go to our body drawing. So this is the body drawing just here. So it's that drawing layer. Sorry if you can't see it. So I've gone down to the body drawing. I'm going to go to my actual drawing file. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Let's just bring that way. Because I want you to see as much of the screen kind of as possible, really. And because I translated down to the colour art layer, I can still see my blue outline. And what I'm now going to do is actually go in and start making some very clear decisions. And the first decision I'm going to make is using this tool, the stroke tool. So a stroke is effectively the edge. It is the line, the wall around a shape. So this blue line here that you should be able to see when you're in the colour art layer, this blue outline, that's the stroke. It's the best way to think of it is like imagine if it's like an invisible wall or a sheet of glass. You can't see it when you look down at it, but it stops paint moving around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stroke tool, which basically adds new stroke lines in to cut pieces away or cut into the body. So the way we do that, so I clicked and held on the paint tool and went to stroke. And then what I'm now going to do is kind of go into this and look for opportunities to sort of add a bit of dimensional shape. So I really like the idea of kind of starting over here, kind of cutting in like this, like that, and then maybe cutting in again, sort of there. Now, you can, oh God, that's blue on blue. What a terrible design choice on my part. It creates blue lines, so you can barely see them. But what it's effectively done, there we go. So I stopped here and it crossed that stroke line, and it's kept this one open, so it hasn't closed the stroke there. It's kept the gap open for me. And if I go all the way up this end, oh look, I didn't quite close the gap. So I'm just going to go in with that stroke tool again, just a little line like that, just to close that gap off. So what does all this mean? Basically, it means that I can now go to my paint bucket. So select the paint tool, select my high value blue, and drop that into the shape. I can do the same thing again if I go to my stroke. So go to the stroke tool. I'm going to just bring the body around this way, and I'm just going to cut a piece off there, like that. So what I've basically done here, I'm just going to use the cutter to trim that off. But what this has done, I've cut the bottom part away, and now I can go in again with my paint tool, but this time with my low value blue. Oh, I've got a gap. Where's my gap? So did you see what happened there? When I drew that, put the paint bucket in, it changed the whole color. That's because there's a gap in the stroke, and I can see it from here actually. So I'm going to step backwards. I can see that the gap is just there. I can see that the lines don't connect. So just go back to the stroke tool. Or there's another one that just says close gap. There you go, just use that. So just close that gap off. And now I'll go back to my paint tool, my blue low value. There you go, and that's closed. And that one's closed. So you can see I can start kind of drawing in and creating some really nice sort of interesting shapes. We did talk briefly about it last week, but one of the things to remember when you're working in vector mode in Harmony is the colours kind of exist forever. So what I mean by that is any time you use one of these colours, it applies to every time you use that colour. So if you change the colour in one frame, it will change it. If you change it in frame 1, it will change it in frame 100. It's really important to remember that you're kind of using these permanent colours. So what I'd like you to do is first off, just go in and add a bit of a bit of shape and a bit of dimension to what you're doing. So I'm going to add a bit more. I'm going to add a bit of a darker patch around here, perhaps. You can add it. You can go. So I'm only on the body layer at the moment, but you can go into all your tentacles as well and think about like adding those lower values in there somewhere. So give you sort of 5-10 minutes to do that, and then I'll show you how we then start to actually think about like animating. So I'm going to make I think around the eye should be darker. I think I've messed that up a little bit, so I'm going to go in and just with that stroke tool and just kind of clean that up a little bit. And I'll show you the other way to do it without the stroke tool as well in a second. So use the stroke. And ooh, not that. That's awful. See where the gaps are. You can see a little gap just there. There is an auto close gap function, but I think it works. It's just not 100% reliable. Or sometimes it will close a gap in a really awkward or kind of aggressive way that maybe doesn't fit with what you're trying to do. Okay, so that works a little bit nicer. So the other method is if you go to your paintbrush tool, this is where some of you go, why did you show us the slow way? It's the controlled way. That's the controlled way to do it with the stroke tool. But there's a kind of faster, a bit more slapdash way to do it, which is to go to your paintbrush tool. So we're still on your color layer just here. Paintbrush tool, set the tool settings, so tool presets, So I don't know, maybe you want to give it like a bit of smoothing. Should probably make this a bit bigger. My resolution is so low on this machine. Let's move that down. So let's say I'm going to use like, I don't know, pastel. And then in the tool settings, you've got this button here, which is the repaint brush. So this is brush tool, repaint brush. And then with the repaint brush, you can actually just apply a color, but only to where it's already been applied. So I can't, let's go pick a color that actually makes sense. Let's go for the high value blue. I'm still on my body layer. If I paint out here, it does nothing. It doesn't work at all. If I paint in here, it stays. Okay? So it allows you to quickly apply a color kind of where you need it to. So if I were to just go, right, let's just scrub that out. I don't like it. So just put blue in over the top. And now I'll go to my high value blue and go, yeah, I just wanted like that maybe. Yeah, just a little bit less. And you can even, if you want to, with your contour editor, you can change, we can redraw these contours if you like. You don't have to keep them the same. So just like you would change a pencil line, you can change a stroke line. Yeah, that'll do. That's not too bad. I think maybe just a little bit more there. And then I like the idea of doing something kind of crazy with the pink. So I'm going to go in and maybe make the brush a bit smaller. There we go. So just put some like kind of crazy lines in it, just to make it feel like visually unique. You know, I don't want it to necessarily feel like I don't know, like it's bland. You know, I want it to feel as three-dimensional as possible. So now I'll go into my tentacles and apply the same level of like color stuff. So keep saving as well. Just keep saving. Always be saving. So that mode. Which one am I on? So I'm on this one just here. I'll probably just cheat with these a little bit actually. So I'm in my color layer. I'm gonna go low value, brush tool, and just kind of wing it and just be like, yeah, I'll just paint it. So maybe a little bit of. But I promise you, the more you know it, you'll just whiz through this sort of stuff.
If I want to draw using the shape, then
so you say, make sure you're on the color layer. You use the brush tool, not the pencil tool. And then in the brush tool properties, you select this, which is the repaint tool function. It's right down the bottom of that menu. So that's the repaint function. So with that selected, it will only paint, where paint has already been applied. So some nice kind of fast way to kind of paint straight in. So I'm not going to be too precious about this. I'm just going to throw some in there just for the sake of it. It kind of looks like that. And this one can kind of, I reckon all of that, just, there you go. My bottom tentacle is pretty much baked in darkness, so that can be almost completely covered. And then my top one's really interesting because it's right at the top, so it's barely going to have any on it. In fact, it's going to have more of the high blue than it is of the low blue. I'm sure everyone in here has probably heard me say it before, but this is more about thinking than it is about drawing. Just think about it. So short tentacle 1. There, it's going to have some highlights on it as well. There we go. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. So yeah, I shall give you a little while just to kind of catch up. Okay. Just a few more minutes and then we'll keep going.
Today, yesterday morning. So you had a lot of free time. How have you been today? Being tired. Huh? What did you say? Sorry? I'm graphic. I thought game this morning. I was like, what? Why? Get away.
Where did you go? Did you start moving?
Yeah, I did it this morning. Cleaning, do laundry, nothing really. I sleep.
Right, okay, so what we're going to do now, I want to get you started on the first kind of sets of movement and how do we actually mobilize an object like this. And then once we've done that, we can kind of really kind of push into actually animating it and kind of bringing it to life. So, first thing that we can do, let's start by deciding how long does our first piece of movement last for. So, one of the best parts about this style of animation, this kind of hybridized style, is that in separating out the objects, so instead of having everything drawn together and saying that the body is on its own layer, I can choose not to have to redraw that. I can hold it in position for a prolonged period of time and then only redraw the things that I need to redraw. So that's kind of what I'm going to do with this. So I'm going to say, right, first things first. Control Z, because I just clicked by accident. First things first, I'm going to go to my body. Okay, so this is not the body peg, this is the body drawing. And I'm going to say that this body lasts for 1 second. So I'm going to jump to frame 24. I'm going to hit F5. So that body as a drawing lasts for that long. The other thing that's also got to last that long is the eye. They are not going to change. Okay, so hit F5 and on the drawing, so I'm not on the peg, I'm on the drawing, and that's how long those last for. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to frame 1. I'm going to select the body peg and I'm going to start to position objects as I need them to be. So what do I mean then by that? First off, let's turn animate on. So down here, bottom left hand, near the bottom of the toolbar on the left hand side, you've got the animate button. So I'm going to turn animate on. I'm then going to go and select I can minimize this. You can see I'm just selecting the body peg, which I know is at the top of the hierarchy. It controls everything else. So with that selected, zoom out a little bit. There we go. With that selected, I'm now going to go to my transform tool. So transform tool is below the animate tool. And you'll see that when I do that, first off, it selects everything because that peg is in charge of everything. So it selects all the objects. Notice how it moved my pivot point to where I set it to on the body. So it's changing, yeah, that was your pivot point, wasn't it? Yeah? So now what I can do is the body peg is selected, I've got animate and transform active, I can grab this and I can move it to where I want it to start from. Which is around there, roughly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump forward to frame 24 and notice on frame 24, did you see how everything just disappeared? So it's like, oh, you've got legs for your first frame, but then as soon as you move, they disappear. So turn onion skin off, yeah? So as soon as you move, your legs disappear because your legs only exist for a frame, but your body exists for longer than that. So I'm going to go to my back, make sure my body peg is selected. I'm going to go to frame 24, and I'm going to select a movement. So I'm going to say, right, you are going to be up here by frame 24. And you'll see straight away it auto keyframed for me because I have animate mode on, and the actual movement is done for me as well. Next thing I want to do is think about the slowing. So I want this to actually pick up in speed. I want it to start slow and get faster. So what I'm going to do to allow that to happen is I'm going to, first off, I need a period of time where propulsion starts and then where it ends. So what I might do is say that actually the movement doesn't really start until like frame maybe 12 or 13. So it doesn't start until it gets to here. So the way to do that is you go to the keyframe and you literally copy and paste. And you'll see now there's no movement and then there's a lot of movement. No movement, lots of movement. Okay. And then between these two, just here, I'm going to change the arc so that it gets slower. So it needs to start fast and slow down, which is this one. It starts fast and then it starts to slow down. So what I'm doing here is I'm just planning for some movement. So I'm kind of happy with that. So that body is not really changing. Now what I can start to do is make some very clear decisions about how some of this movement is going to happen. So for example, you remember we talked about the squid movement? I did lots of weird arm shapes last week. I know that the tentacles kind of out straight where they are now. That's kind of like the resting position, like they're just sort of sitting behind. And I know that when the squid's moving forward, so when it's propelling forwards, that's going to be part of that position. Yeah, they're going to just rest behind and it's going to propel. But to get to that rested position with it moving, it's got to pull its tentacles out and then bring them back together. Okay, I've got to get that movement first. So I know that this drawing that I have for the tentacles, it's okay, but not okay all the time. It will be used at certain points in time within the movement. It's the resting position, so I know it's good for frame 1. And it's also a static resting position, but I also know that it's a good resting position here as the squid kind of moves towards the last piece of the cycle. So I know that it's probably good from about, so if movement starts at frame 13, that resting position is going to be reached about frame 15, 16, roughly. So at frame 16, these rested drawings are kind of okay. So how do we do that? How do we start deciding when to use these drawings and when not to? Well, my preferred method is to kind of put them everywhere and then take them out. So what do I mean by that? Right. Go to node view. Make sure you're on frame 1 as well. So you're on frame 1. Go to node view and shift select or draw a box round. Sorry, shift select. Draw a box round all of your drawing layers. Okay, this is why it's always good to kind of keep them lined up or keep them relatively close to one another. The reason I say go to node view is because I want you to get into the habit of using the node view and not avoiding it. But basically, I just wanted to select all my drawings. Then what I'm going to do is go to frame 24. Yeah, so frame 24. And then just hit F5. So I've exposed them all out, and you'll see now that they're there forever. And then what did we say? Did I say frame 16, didn't I? Was the next point at which they'd reach a rested position. Let me just go back. Well, you guys know your second years. Like a lot of animation is just like thinking, isn't it? You're processing movement in your head and thinking like, how does this make sense? So I know that that's a key kind of point at which movement starts just here. So I think that rested position, yeah, it's gonna reach, yeah, frame 16 I think is okay. So at frame 16, with these drawing layers selected, I'm going to start using some of my advanced animation tools, just like we did last week when we were doing hand drawn. So with the advanced animation tools, I'm going to hit the duplicate tool, and that's going to cut all of those. So if I unclick them, you see how it cut all of the drawings, apart from the eye. Don't worry about the eye, that's like its own thing. Let's minimize that so no one can see it. So it cut all the drawings apart from the body, but the tentacles, all 4 tentacles had a cut in them. Just step backwards, so I've got them all done again. So just to go through it, so it's select all your drawings, which are the blue ones. Go to frame 16. Where are we? Frame 16. You can see they're all highlighted there. And on frame 16, I hit the duplicate drawing, and that provided a cut. Now what I'm going to do is go to frame number 2. Okay. And then on frame number 2, I know that actually we're not going to need these drawings anymore, as sad as it sounds. So on frame number 2, I'm going to click create empty drawing. And then what that's done, if I unclick, is it's actually wiped all of that information. So it's like, oh, you've got to draw it. So if we just focus in on this tentacle, Okay, you've got a drawing there for frame 1. Frame 2, sorry, no, you deleted all your drawings. If we go forward to frame 16, your drawing's back up here in its rested position. So it exists, and then it doesn't exist, and then it exists again.
And then you select all of the tentacles.
So the reason I'm doing this is because now what's going to happen is between frame 2 and frame 15, I can start to draw in new tentacles which have that movement. Yeah, so I've kept the things that I didn't need to change, super simple, and now I can focus on going, right, okay, what's the middle, you know, what's the movements in between? And when we think about the traditional drawing stuff we did last week, or the traditional animation stuff, we're going to follow quite a similar pipeline. So for me, I need to find like what's the next most important drawing. And it's going to be around, where are we? So movement started here, doesn't it? So movement starts at frame 14. So it's going to be on frame 11. It's like I'm just doing it in my head. So it's like, yeah, it goes out and then it comes in. So I would say frame 11 is the point at which all of the tentacles are pulled up as far as they can go. You know, they kind of pull apart and then come back together in order to create some kind of propulsion. So I think it's frame 11 is the point at which I need to kind of get each one of those tentacles drawn in such a way that they're flexed right out. So the way I do that is, so I'm on frame 11, I'm on short tentacle 1. So if I'm just going to zoom in a bit down here. So I'm on frame 11, I'm on the drawing layer of short tentacle 1, and what I'm going to do is just here I'm going to select create empty drawing again, and the reason I'm doing that is because I wanted to make a cut. Yeah, so I created an empty drawing. I'm going to extend my, you know, these little blue handles, you probably looked at them last week. I'm going to extend my onion skinning backwards. Such a bizarre kind of conversation to be having. Can you imagine doing an animation lesson where it was audio only? It just wouldn't make any sense, would it? So I'm going on frame 11, short tentacle 1. I've extended my onion skin back so that I can see the original drawing. Okay. I can even see the original peg position. That's kind of helpful. So there's the peg position. But now what I'm going to do is with my pencil tool, we do it all again. We go back to a traditional animation pipeline. So I'm going to go to my vectorized line, make sure I'm on my line layer, got my pencil, make sure I'm kind of happy with the way it's behaving. Yeah, it's not too bad. I might make the pencil a little bit, smoothing's fine, but it needs to be a bit thinner. I'm going to use those traditional animation tools just like I did before, but now what I'm going to do is kind of get that shape. Like that. Oh, look at that. That was awful. I should hang my head in shame. Look how far apart that gap is. It's absolutely terrible, but the principle's kind of the same. So I've drawn the line. I'll go in with the contour editor and just kind of clean the line up as best I kind of can. That's it. And then I probably need to go down here. Definitely need to close that gap. Okay, I'm going to have to go in with the close gap tool and just draw a line between the 2 points. Oh, sorry, I need to convert it first. So take my, in my pencil tool, yeah, convert my line art to color art, go down to my color art layer, and there you go. There's the gap kind of closed. And then get that paint in there as quick as I can. Different ways to do it. You can, I mean, I like to use a combination of tools. So I generally go paint bucket first. Yeah, dump the blue in, and then I'll go in with, so I'm on color art, remember, I've jumped to color art. I go paint bucket first, and then I'll go in with the repaint tool with the paintbrush and be like, okay, I repainted, just get that in there. maybe like that. And then we said blue low value, so that needs to come in like here somewhere, maybe down here. Little kind of splash of it there. So that's the first tentacle done. And if I just go back to the timeline, sorry, this screen is far too low res for this kind of jumping around. But basically what's happening now, there's my newly drawn tentacle. If we just look at short tentacle 1 in the timeline from frame 1, so frame 1 to frame 24, it now goes drawing, nothing, big dramatic drawing, straight line. So you can see I'm beginning that process of blocking out to create smooth movement. But I'm using every trick in the book that I can to make Harmony do this as fast as possible. I want super smooth, super clean animation that still kind of feels hand-drawn, that has elements of drawing to it. Because I've still got, these are just my key drawings, I've still got my in-betweens to do. So now I'm going to follow that same process with all the others. That's okay?
If I have the colors inside and I don't want to change it, can I edit the whole thing together?
So what do you mean? If you want to, so
Yeah, because if now I redraw a second one, the color inside will change.
yes, it will.
But if I want to keep...
You want to keep the same, you want to keep the spots exactly where they are.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I know why you're asking that, and I will teach you how to do that, but not this week. Okay, that's a different kind of animation. That's what we call definition rigging, bone-based animation, where the shapes never change. What I'd like you to do is try and redraw them. So we're kind of keeping, like I said, it's hybrid. It feels hand-drawn, but it's got some of those little tricks that make it a bit faster. So what we're going to do, the time now, yeah, it's 3:30. So this is quite a long process that I'm asking you to do here. We're going to take, you've got 15-minute break if you want it. But yeah, I'm going to pause the recording. I'll pick it up again in like 15 minutes or so. And then we'll kind of plow through getting as many of these tentacles done in their key drawings as possible. So don't worry about in-betweens just yet, but we'll kind of get as many of them drawn as we can. Like I said, it will feel slower, it will feel slightly convoluted, but I promise you,
Okay, I thought...
go away. I promise you, do it once and you'll get faster at it the second time.